Chair Miller is absent and excused today, so I'll be leading our meeting. Commissioners Mann and McCrimmon are also absent and excused. We begin each meeting with an opportunity for the public to comment on items not on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment this morning on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. I'm going to turn it over to Attorney York. He has an announcement.
No, I just wanted to introduce Carolyn Bockel. She's with the City Attorney's Office. She's been with the city for 13 years. She's going to be my interim replacement until a new deputy is hired. So I wanted to formally introduce you to Carolyn and have her at the table.
Thank you for having me. I've been with the city for about 13 years and mostly supporting Raleigh Water, but I'm looking forward to this new gig.
Welcome. I'm happy to have you. We have one item on our consent agenda, rezoning Z 7022, which is recommended for deferral. Does staff have anything to add about this agenda item?
Yes, Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. I wanted to add the agenda has the recommended action as deferral to the February 11th, your next meeting. The applicant has indicated that they would like a little more time to work on the case and would prefer the February 25th meeting.
Thank you, Hannah. Do the commissioners have any questions or comments? If not, then I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I need to change
Just a minute.
the consent agenda.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Are we good?
Make sure you're not approving the consent agenda. You're approving the amended date.
Approving the amended date of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Commissioner Haver has moved to approve the amended date of the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Raines has seconded. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We have two items under old business. First is Z 3124 901 Nowell Road, which we heard at our January 14th meeting. The case was deferred so the applicant could consider conditions related to height, number of units, and affordability. We'll hear from staff with an update to this case.
Good morning, Vice Chair Bennett. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. Good morning, Planning Commission. So you last heard about this case at the last Planning Commission meeting, and the applicant has elected not to make changes to the rezoning request. Just as a reminder, this site is in West Raleigh near NC 54. It's off Nowell Road. There is a single proposed zoning condition that limits residential density to 8 units. And the request represents a moderate increase in entitlement from 2 to 8 estimated units. And the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and consistent with the future land use map and consistent with the urban form map. Consistent policies are related to compact and infill development, as well as a couple of policies specific to the Arena Blue Ridge small area plan. And inconsistent policies are related to future land use and response time standards for fire. And approval of this rezoning request would result in a future land use map amendment from low-scale residential to moderate-scale residential, like so. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is March 15th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. We heard from the applicant and the public at our last meeting. Are there members of the public here today who wish to speak on this item? In that case, I will allow 2 minutes for each side for additional comment. And I'm sorry, could you indicate that you're speaking in support or opposition to?
I'm in opposition to the case as it stands, Chair Bennett.
Mr. Geary, could you state your name for the record, please?
It's Bob Geary. 6332 Nowell Point Drive. I'll be brief. The last meeting, the applicant said that he would reduce the height, the allowable height of the project from 50 feet to 40 feet to be consistent with the neighboring houses, and he didn't do it. So there was discussion about whether he would offer affordable units in this project, and I think that's an interesting topic. Chair Bennett, you made a point about other cases where that has not been offered. He said, and I almost rose out of my chair to say yes, that he would accept Section 8 vouchers on 2 of the units, which I think on this site, right across from a bus stop, and not far from the arena and not far from Crabtree Valley, that'd be a good thing. But he didn't offer it, and it isn't customary. But the height is an issue, I think. So surprised he did not offer that. He seemed to actually offer it when he stood up last time. So just point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geary. Are there other members of the public to speak in opposition? Thank you. Is the applicant here? You have an additional 2 minutes to present what you'd like.
Good morning, staff. Yeah, we did talk about the height last time. We were not sure. The property actually next to that land, I don't know if I could tell, it's a multi-unit just built. It's about 45 feet. So they agreed to lower it to 40 feet since, the apartment complex now right next to me is 45. So probably will go, about 45. So the request was to lower it to 40. So I'll probably offer to 45 as far as height.
So we have done our one bite at the apple in terms of adjusting conditions, right?
No,
From
he
your-
hasn't adjusted. He said he would consider changing conditions. He has not changed, as I understand from staff.
Correct.
He has not changed his conditions. He
Okay.
still has an opportunity. You still have time
Okay.
to defer this and give him an opportunity to change his conditions.
So would you like us to defer this again so you can change or add a
No,
condition?
I looked in the change. I mean, last time we talked, it was not clear the affordable housing, and it's only, up to 8 units. So it didn't make sense to me to put that condition.
Okay,
It is a
but you want to
condition,
add
it's-
the height condition?
Yeah.
So would you like us to defer the case so you can come back to us
No,
with that condition?
Well, let's vote on it today. I mean, we could add it today.
No, we can't add it today. You would have had to have added it already so we could consider it. We can't consider it if it's not already added as a condition.
Yeah, the procedure for revising conditions, once the case is at the Planning Commission, is that you submit to the planner, in this case Matthew, the draft condition unsigned, no later than this Friday. Staff will review it and make any necessary comments. If you're just adding a height condition, there probably won't be any substantial comments. But then you have till the following Friday to submit signed conditions, and then it can be considered at the very next meeting, which would be February,
I
March.
think if the proposal consists with the rules and regulation, I think I will ask you to vote on it, so at least we'll get it.
So you'd like us
passed,
to
yeah.
vote on it today?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. So Attorney York, let's say we did vote to approve, could we do so and ask council to consider the height condition? Could he add that condition before it goes to council?
You've made recommendations to council before, either in favor or in opposition, but forecasted that the applicant has offered to revise their conditions. And so this would be very similar.
Okay, so I mean, we could vote to approve or deny with that. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Isn't that right, Bynum?
I'm going to bring it back to the table now, and commissioners, if you have questions or comments. Commissioner Fox?
I understand the concern about the height coming from neighbors, and I'd be willing to include that in our motion. In regards to the affordable units, again, I'm going to acknowledge the ability to do that in an 8-unit project is very challenging and puts a large onus on a private developer and a smaller scale developer. So I'm not interested in including that one.
Thank you, Commissioner Fox. Are there any other, excuse me, questions or comments?
I would vote against this if it was just that. I think this opens the door to one-off spot zonings, and it's inconsistent with the future land use map. And yeah, I think for the sake of consistency, my comments would be the same as last meeting when we heard it, which was in this same state.
Thank you, Commissioner Peeler. Other questions or comments?
I'll just make note that I acknowledge Roberta's comments about the challenges with committing such a small parcel to affordable housing restrictions. But I do appreciate any opportunity, if it voluntarily does come to fruition. It would be great to see that in the community, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Littman. Yes,
And
Commissioner
I had
Fox.
a follow-up question. This might be a question for the attorneys. It may be a question for Ms. Walter as well. In regards to including a condition relating to vouchers, just wanted to acknowledge that comment from Mr. Gary. I have not seen that before, and I was concerned, does that kind of meet the threshold of what we call like a poison pill?
We have talked about that as we've looked at many options for how we can help applicants make commitments to affordable housing if they are interested in that as part of their projects. Addressing vouchers via a zoning condition is very difficult to enforce for staff,
Okay.
especially when you recall that most enforcement is complaint-based in the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. I have a question for staff. I wasn't here at the last meeting, and I've asked this question enough, I should probably know the answer. My concern, appreciate the conversation around height, is the proximity to the existing single-family home adjacent to it. So I want to understand, there is no rear yard setback, but there are some requirements in the code that dictate where the building can be built. And can you remind me what those are? And again, I ask this question a lot, so I should know it, but just getting back from holiday, so.
There would be a neighborhood transition requirement on the north and western property boundaries from this perspective. So that's a minimum 10-foot wide buffer between this property and any development there, as well as the property to the north and the property to the west. And the reason it wouldn't apply to the south is because that is a flag lot that has an existing hotel use. That's hard to see on here because it's off the map, but it's over here, and the lot looks like this. So the neighborhood transitions would not apply to that green portion, but it would apply here and here.
Yep. So we're going from a 30-foot rear yard to a 10-foot rear yard, so theoretically, he could build a 50-foot building 10 feet next to an existing single-family home.
So the developer would have an option of several different protective yards, but that 10-foot is the minimum required. I think it's called a Type A neighborhood transition buffer.
I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, just kind of what I'm thinking right now.
Thank
So
you, Commissioner O'Haver.
Maybe for a little bit of additional context, he's also proposing a green frontage, which would prohibit parking between the building and the street. And I believe the intent is to have parking in the rear of the property.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. That's the intent, but he could sell the property, might not develop it, and we don't know what the future intent is. So I've just seen too many times, and I just wouldn't want to be put in that situation. I'm all for housing. You guys know, as long as I've been on Planning Commission, but my concerns have been and continue to be existing single-family homes and building right up basically on the property line. So,
Commissioner Fox?
May I ask a clarifying question? If this were not to be rezoned and just built with a single-family home, what's the height limit that would be allowed now?
40 feet.
Okay. So then I guess a question to Commissioner O'Haver, is the 45 a compromise that's acceptable?
I'm fine with 45. My concern is that the existing zoning requires a 30-foot rear yard, which seems a lot, but putting a 45-foot building 10 feet from the property line.
Okay.
So that's what my concern is. It's currently 30. I could find a compromise in there for sure.
Other questions or comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I have one more quick comment.
Okay.
I think I
Commissioner
just
Peeler?
want to speak to the affordability and the notion that it's, we talk about it a lot up here, that it's potentially financially infeasible to do on-site affordable housing. And I just really want to challenge that, because there's a property with 2 homes by right now. We're talking about making that to 8. So the notion of adding a small affordability restriction in 1 or 2 of the units, you're changing it from 2 homes to 8. So I just think that's something to think about when we talk about what's financially infeasible and what is feasible.
But I think those 8 would likely be rental, correct? I mean, we could figure out like a cap rate on this and like what the pro forma is.
Yeah, but 8
And it-
versus 2 homes.
2 homes for sale versus 8 homes rental is a very different product in terms of what the value of it is.
That's true, but I mean, that's not our job up here at Planning Commission. I don't think is to decide what the pro formas are.
No,
respectfully.
but no, I'm just acknowledging it's not, it likely is not financially feasible for a rental product with 8 units to have 12 to 25% of the units without some subsidy. So the majority of affordable housing projects are either LIHTC or bonded. This would not meet the threshold to partake in either of those.
I'm just not sure we know that, and it's not part of the comp plan or the UDO. So I have a tough time with measuring our votes against what is something in theory about the pro forma of the property. And I think we're around the, in other places we have seen voluntary affordability conditions that would not be that off from 1 out of 8 or 2 out of 8. So just my thoughts.
I'll just add that, and I had comments at our last meeting about the affordability, having that as a condition. My comments weren't so much about whether or not it was financially feasible or infeasible. My questions were more about fairness and us asking all of our applicants. I just felt it wasn't quite fair that we were asking this applicant who's before us representing himself for 8 units if he would be willing to have an affordability condition when we have multi-million-dollar private developers standing before us proposing hundreds of units, and we don't ask the same thing. So that was my issue with that. If we're going to ask it of this applicant, then I would expect that question asked of every applicant. And if we're going to vote no because someone won't add an affordability clause in an area where we think it makes sense to have affordability, then I would expect to see consistency. That was really my my issue with it, not so much whether it was financially feasible or infeasible. I still feel that way. I mean, I don't, well, first of all, we aren't supposed to make decisions based on whether or not they add an affordability condition or not. But, you know, aside from that, I just, that's where my comment was coming from. I'm not, if I vote no for this, it won't be because of the lack of an affordability clause. I am concerned about the height and next to a single-family home. Are there any other questions or comments before we make a motion? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion. Anyone? Commissioner Raines?
Thanks, Chair Bennett. In general, I'm in favor of more housing opportunities. So for zoning case C-3124, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 28th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement. I would also like to add that council consider a height limitation of 45 feet for the proposed application.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Fox has seconded. All in favor? 1, 2, 3. That's 4. All opposed? That's 3. 4 to 3. Would you each like to state for the record your reason for opposing?
Sure. I agree with Commissioner Raines, definitely in support of more housing opportunities. I'm okay that there's not affordability attached to this. My concern is the height, the potential height that close to an existing single-family home.
Thank you. Commissioner Peeler, I know you've stated it, but do you want to state again for the record? Because council will ask.
Yeah, I mean, I share the concerns about the height. I think also just it being inconsistent with the future land use map. And because of that inconsistency, it would be nice to see other conditions that in a way made up for that. And one of those things would be affordability that first come to mind in an area like this, near a bus stop, and in a generally more working class part of Raleigh.
Thank you. And my reason for opposing was because of the height. I would support if the height were changed. Sometimes opposition gets recognized more impactfully. So I'm hoping the height will be reduced and this can be approved. Okay, moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 524, 3104 South Hall Road, which was first heard on December 10th, 2024. I need to be recused from this case because the firm I work for is part of the applicant team. So could someone please make a motion to recuse me?
Motion to recuse Commissioner Bennett.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you very much. I've asked Commissioner Otwell if he will facilitate the discussion on this case.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bennett. I think according to the rules, we either need to have unanimous consent for me to continue as a chair pro tem. So,
Sorry?
Yeah.
Do we need to take a vote on it?
You
or-
can make a motion if you'd like. Just make the motion.
Can I make the motion?
Yes.
So I move to have Chair Otwell serve as Chair Pro Tem for case CP 524.
Second.
All in favor? We have unanimous consent.
thank you, Chair Bennett, Vice Chair Bennett. So, as Vice Chair Bennett just said, this is CP 524, request to amend map T1 to remove a 2-lane divided avenue between Skycrest and South Hall Drive. The applicant asked for additional time to have discussions with Duke Energy and has brought it back to the commission. There have been no changes to the application, and I would like to hear what happened in those discussions. So is there an update from staff?
Good morning, Commission. Robert Tate, Planning and Development. You largely sum up the updates to this request. So they had a conversation with Duke Energy along with transportation staff. The conversation seemed to consist of what we already knew about encroachment into the easement, but transportation staff is here to maybe provide additional information if you like that. And then also wanted to also uplift and highlight that the street plan alignment itself with South Hall Road would connect to existing dedicated right-of-way, which would cross a stream, and that's a normal action. This type of crossing is common and would be reviewed during the development review process. But with that, if you have any questions for myself or transportation staff, we're here.
Thank you. Is there anybody here to speak for or against this request at this time? Do you have an update? If there's nobody against, we'll provide both sides 2 minutes for a quick update, and then we'll bring it back.
Charlie Townsend, I'm with VHB 940 Main Campus Drive, Suite 500 here in Raleigh. I won't go through all of our slides from our last presentation. I will highlight that in yellow here is that Duke Energy easement. We also have identified streams and wetlands that cross right through the proposed alignment. This is that existing right-of-way stub that was previously mentioned that connects to our property. The proposed route, as shown here, is the Avenue 2-lane divided with a raised median. It has proposed impacts to streams, wetland, and also crosses a 100-year floodplain boundary. Additionally, the request from the City of Raleigh street plan or comp plan street, you can see that these are the site distances that would be required along a 35 mile an hour design speed. Specifically want to bring to attention a stop condition here where you're going to have to look back to the oncoming traffic with no other stop conditions. Additionally, the intersection itself here is at 10 degrees of an intersection. City of Raleigh standard policy is 75 degrees minimum for that. This is the South Hall Road that's existing, so you can kind of see where those site distances are going to be crossing. You have energy or power poles as well as significant existing vegetation. We also want to highlight that what we're asking for is to remove the street on our property. It's everything on the red to the right on the screen would have to be built by the City of Raleigh. Everything that's required by our development would be to stub the proposed route, and then the code has provisions that we would have to stub and not impact that environmental features, but pay a fee in lieu for the ultimate crossing just to our property line. So our request here today is to try and create a connection that can be continued in the future. Even if we build this stub road, we don't know when the road is going to be built. That's not our development's responsibility. We did meet with Duke Energy to talk about the two.
And I think that we'll allow another minute to keep going, please.
So we did meet with Duke Energy to talk about the two City of Raleigh preferred alignments. Duke Energy sent us their guidelines. It was Bruce Pate with Duke Energy. We met with City of Raleigh staff on December 16th. They highlighted that streets may not run parallel to the center line of the Duke Energy easement or within the easement area, and further, streets, roads, driveways may not form intersections or entrances within the easement. Our proposed solution, it would be compliant with the City of Raleigh Stub Street policy. It would remove the road to the north, removing the environmental impacts and the undue burden on our property, as well as allow for the development of the assisted living facility that we're proposing. This alignment here shows that what would potentially be required from a Stub Street continuation per the City of Raleigh Street Manual and the City of Raleigh UDO. And then I'll end it with, this prioritizes vehicular and pedestrian safety, minimizes environmental impacts, is context sensitive to the surrounding uses, and increases housing options as there's only one other licensed assisted living facility in 2.5 miles.
Thank you. I think we got the gist of the message. Is there anybody here to speak against? Yeah, given that there's no one to speak against, let's bring it back to the table and take questions and comments from the commissioners. Anybody have questions or comments? Commissioner Raines?
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Otwell. Questions for clarification for city staff transit. There's some new information I heard today that I want to get clarification on. One is the 10 degrees versus 75 degree view angle. I think that's what was said. I would like to have transit identify what that is and if that's a safety issue. And if that is a safety issue, is that something that's going to be picked up with the current traffic line designed? The second item is clarify the alignment with Duke easement requirements. It said applicant said it cannot be parallel to the easement. Is that within the easement or adjacent to? Or maybe the applicant could.
We'd like to hear from transportation staff on this, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Bradley Kimbrell, Transportation Department. So the question was related to the design standards, specific to how intersection alignment is held to a minimum deflection angle, I guess. Is that a fair way to capture that?
Yes, that was the question. There was a note about 10 degrees versus 75 degrees. I wasn't sure what that was referring to and if it is a safety issue with the current planned road alignment.
Correct. So the city does have a design standard that speaks to the minimum amount of deflection that an intersection can occur at. That level of detail would get reviewed. It would be accounted for. Measures would be taken into account when we do a full design. So when a much larger project was to come in and get to that level of detail, all those factors would be taken into account, as well as sight distance and other control and safety measures. I think today what's in front of us is a request about policy and overall what the network intent is. So appreciate the question as far as the specific of standards go, but that's really what that is meant to do. And staff would most likely handle all those level of details during the review and design phase.
Thank you. Could you also respond to the Duke easement requirements for parallel versus perpendicular road alignment adjacent to their easements? Is that adjacent or is that within their easement?
I believe the feedback from Duke was their easements, they're sensitive to the impacts of that. So as it relates to infrastructure and how infrastructure then, road infrastructure ultimately plays with their overhead infrastructure, they prefer the least amount of impact. And so through those conversations, which are common all over the city and areas where their easements coincide with roadway, they would prefer a perpendicular crossing to minimize the amount of crossing that a street would go up under an easement. Does that answer the question?
I think, but the plan has the road adjacent to the easement, right? It's not, or does it cross over into the easement?
Let's see, did we have an exhibit there? Or am I going back or?
Oh, okay.
Is that the one you want?
Yes, thank you. So this one doesn't go over the easement line. The alignment is
correct.
actually outside of it, so there's no impact on
That's
Duke.
correct. Within this scenario, which is reflective of the current street plan alignment, the proposed road would not impact Duke's easement whatsoever.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Comments? Commissioner Fox?
Yeah, Bradley, this may be another question for you. I apologize. Can you come back down? In reading transportation staff's review of the proposed alternate, I just wanted to be clear on one issue. Is the issue at hand more from a network perspective of the alternate not providing a route that's acceptable, or is it the capacity that it's a change from the cross-section?
I want to make sure I understand the question, and may need to pull on the team that did the analysis. The question is the alignment versus what was proposed as an alternative, and how staff viewed the impacts within what the model analysis shows. Is that a way to capture what the
That's a
question
way
is?
to capture it, yeah.
So as the model currently shows, and in the way the current adopted plan, South Hall realignment would operate as an alternative north-south route to alleviate some of the capacity on New Hope Road today, just to the west. So with an alternative alignment that does not establish the continuous north-south that South Hall shows today in the plan, we would not expect the same benefit to New Hope as the model and what the adopted plan is meant to do.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Hare?
I'm not sure who the question is for. I'm just, the applicant had mentioned that the proposed alignment is shown in property that they do not own. Do they own the property to the northwest? And IMAP's Miss Peggy Johnston owns that property that they're proposing to put a road through the middle of. So I'm trying to figure out the difference between property they don't own to the northeast versus the northwest is still shown as a stub going to a piece of property they do not own. And so IMAP shows it as Peggy Johnston is the owner of that. So have there been conversations with that homeowner? Or that parcel owner, I guess? I'll speak to it. Sure.
We have reached out. We've not heard back from that property owner. The exhibit that we showed with the alignment in red going, that would be compliant with the City of Raleigh's stub street policy as well as block perimeter. So our development's only required to stub to our property line, just as on the following slide where I showed us stubbing the road to our property line. And then it would be on a future development of the adjacent property. Should that occur, they would make that connection.
Thank you. That answers my question. Hearing Bradley say that the new alignment would not really support their plan for traffic movement, and the fact that the applicant is proposing a stub street to a private property owner that they have not heard back from, I'm not sure I can support this at this time.
Any more questions or comments from commissioners?
I do have one question. On the city required alternative, that is not a two-way connection to South Hall Road, correct? It's just, as in an exit ramp, it's only flowing north. Traffic can't turn right off South Hall and go onto that stub, I'm assuming, unless there's something I'm missing from the drawing. Right.
If staff would care to respond.
Sure. I'm sorry. Can you repeat your question?
I think the answer is yes, but this drawing right here that's on there of the city, of what's required in the comp plan, that is only a one-way entry onto South Hall. People can't turn right off South Hall onto the stub, correct?
People can turn right onto South Hall. From Caslin Drive?
No, from South Hall.
This South Hall?
Yeah, traveling northeast on South Hall. They cannot turn right onto the proposed new stub, correct?
The new proposed South Hall Road, they can't turn right. Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking this model that's on the screen. If a car is traveling northeast on South Hall Road, they cannot turn right onto this stub, correct? It's just a one-way, one direction extension.
No, it will be two-way.
It would be two-way.
Right. So that's, I think, operational issue that we would resolve in design, right? So you don't want an unsafe maneuver, I think is what you're asking about. So how that works exactly with the existing South Hall Road and how it enters the new South Hall Road would be something we would have to resolve at design. But the proposed South Hall Road extension is a two-way.
Okay, okay. I asked that because it resembles, like an exit ramp, which would be one direction
Right.
only.
It is hard to picture from the aerial imagery, I think.
Thank you.
While you're up there, would you mind stating your name and your role for the record,
Yes,
please?
sorry. Margaret Tartala, Transportation.
And I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Has staff been able to or is willing to estimate the impact that this proposed, as it exists, street plan would have on the New Hope Road service? Like, what's the level of service expected to be at 50 years, and what would it be given this, if this street section were built out as currently planned?
So we haven't done an intersection level analysis on level of service on the nearby intersections or New Hope Road. That's a pretty in-depth analysis that normally gets done either as part of a really big plan like the MPO's plan update or as part of a really big site development. I think in general, we had some analysis done with the Triangle Regional Model, which is through our MPO, Campo. And I could get you exact numbers. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but essentially, when this section of South Hall Road is developed, you see in the model in the future that New Hope Road, the numbers aren't expanding to the same extent, right? So instead of having, looking out to 2050, say, 11,000 on South Hall and 24,000 on New Hope, if both were built out like they are expected to be, you would see 5,000 still on South Hall because it hasn't been built out to serve the function that people would want to use it for, and 28,000 or 30,000 on New Hope Road. But I can provide specific numbers if that would be helpful.
I don't feel the need to hold this case up to get those specific numbers unless the commission feels differently. How accurate have the models been to date in predicting the traffic increase along New Hope Road?
Sure, that's a great question. I don't think we've ever, or really Campo has ever done an analysis on that. There's definitely uncertainty. You're looking out 50 years, we're using numbers from developments that we know about and the land use, but when the land use changes, when we have rezonings, those numbers can change. So Campo does updates every 5 years to try to keep up with changes. They're actually doing an update right now that's still sort of in the beginning stages, but there is uncertainty.
I'm sorry, one last question. Can you say if those models have taken into account induced demands from a new throughway, given the street section being built out? Would building this street out induce demand? And would there, in fact, be more traffic using the whole network with a better network than if this were to remain or to be built out as a neighborhood road?
I can't speak off the top of my head to how they account for induced demand. The models are very complex, and so I want to say it's accounted for, but I would have to look into sort of their methodology in order to speak more to that.
Commissioner Fox?
Thank you. Margaret, one follow-up question. Sure. Did I hear you say Campo is currently updating future projections? Okay.
Yes, so the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP, is currently being updated. They have just collected all the land use data, so they're still tweaking the model so that they can do an alternatives analysis in the near future.
Do you know when that might be anticipated to have more information?
I'd have to look at the specific timeline. I think it's not going to be until next year, though.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kimbrell, would you like to follow up?
I just want to clarify something related to the model from a context standpoint. So the model accounts for build-out probability of land. So think about it as the model is considering, okay, all of this available land on this area, What is the probability or likelihood of what it yields? How many additional trips? And then it takes into account what the street network is available to accommodate the demand based off of that. So the street network is not necessarily, in this model, driving what the demand is. It's really accounting for how that demand uses the larger network. When you consider alternative routes and how drivers would choose a parallel route to kind of level spread, if you will, the demand across 1, 2, 3 additional roadway corridors, we would then start to see those corridors get balanced based off of that projected demand. So I'm not sure if that helps. The model doesn't drive the traffic demand. It really helps account for where that demand would then go into the network. Generally speaking, more than one route helps all the network.
Does the model assume that a better network would have more users and higher VMT or VMT, vehicle miles traveled? Does the model assume that with a better network there will be more driving and longer trips?
I don't believe the model is accounting for that. I think the model is accounting for what routes are available to drivers to choose from. Is it one route and now everybody's using one road, or are there multiple routes that can handle a level of capacity, and that then offers choice to the drivers?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So, anecdotal, the first traffic lesson I ever received was engineer described it as draining a bucket, and you're draining a bucket of water. Do you want one hole to drain the bucket, or do you want multiple holes, smaller holes, to drain the water more efficiently? So that's how we typically would look at that comparison.
Thank you.
Hope that helps.
If there's any more questions or comments from commissioners?
I mean, I just want to say I'm genuinely torn on this case because I think that connectivity is vital, and we talk about that a lot up here. And especially this portion of Raleigh in the county has a lot of disconnected development. That said, this is a senior living facility, so it probably doesn't in reality require the same car connectivity that most developments would. And I also think the environmental impacts, as staff pointed out, are pretty large to building through this floodplain here. I don't know. I'm not providing a lot of valuable insight there. I'm just saying I'm very torn on this.
Commissioner Fox.
I'd like to agree with your comments there. I'm also torn on this one, and I'm hopeful in thinking that there might be additional data coming forward, although that is a year out, that would actually help in making a decision like this in terms of the impact to the overall network. So for that reason, I'm leaning towards a recommendation of denial.
Any further comments or questions from the commission? Commissioner Raines?
Yes, thanks. I'd like to echo Commissioner O'Haver's and Commissioner Fox's comments. From the from the information we received in the last 2 meetings, it seems like the current roadway enhances and is a public benefit for the entire street grid in the surrounding area. And the city has noted that they have dealt with environmental issues like this on other projects for street improvements and additions. So in general, I would, plus the fact that an adjacent landowner would be required to make a committed effort for connectivity, I think I would not support this application.
If there's no further comments or questions, entertain a motion.
Are you ready for a motion?
Yes, I'm asking for a motion.
Okay.
Please, Commissioner Fox.
In regards to Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 524, I recommend denial of the proposed amendment as it is not reasonable nor in the public interest and is inconsistent with comprehensive plan policies related to coordination with land use, right-of-way reservation, integration of travel modes, eliminating gaps, and preserving the grid.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Raines has seconded. All in favor? All opposed? The motion passes 6-1. The Planning Commission will recommend denial to the council. 5-1? Did I miss? Oh, that's right. We have somebody now. 5-1. Thank you.
Commissioner Otwell, if I could, again, just for the record, anybody or all of you who've been on the commission for a while know that those dashed lines are my nemesis. I think this is the first time I've voted in denial of removing some of those. But I think because of those dashed lines and what they mean, the environmental impact is certainly some concern, but just putting a dashed line on somebody else's property that's not aware of it, I don't really see how I can approve that. So if they came forward and said, oh, we've talked, they're in agreement, so on and so forth, maybe the fact that transportation says it wouldn't function as well as what they had intended, but there's less environmental impacts and there's better configuration, okay, but that point alone, there's just no way I can support this.
Thank you. I think with that, we can call Commissioner Bennett back to the table, resume discussions with her as the chair for today.
Excuse me, Commissioner Otwell, since you were the lone no vote, they often ask what the person voting no, what their concern was. I know in this case, basically your no was supporting the application.
Yeah, so I support the application to remove the street connection. I don't think that it has been proven by the Campo models that there's a significant impact that could be relied upon, and I suspect that a better connection through here will increase the total number of trips and that we're not going to see a total benefit.
Thank you, Commissioner Otwell. We will move on to new business now. We have 3 items under new business, the text change and 2 rezonings. First up is text change TCZ, that's hard to say fast, 4124 3616 Lewisberry Road. We'll receive a presentation from staff.
Good morning, Vice Chair Bennett, members of the Planning Commission. Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. This is a request for a text change of zoning conditions on a just about 1 acre parcel in northeast Raleigh. And your deadline for action is March 29th. Zoning in this area is predominantly mixed use with some residential. There are commercial uses along Mitchell Mill Road, along the frontage of Mitchell Mill Road, and as well as moderate-scale residential uses to the northeast and southwest, and there is private open space to the southeast, which is, I believe, a golf course. Here are some views of the site along Lewisberry Road. So the applicant is proposing removing several conditions from the request. It would maintain a limitation on retail space to 5,000 square feet. It would remove a condition requiring any new parking area to be located at the side or rear of the building. It would maintain a building height of maximum 45 feet. Remove a setback condition, a maximum building setback condition, and a requirement that the development will be residential in character. And it would maintain a single point of access to the property on Lewisberry Road across from Shady Bottom Lane. It would also remove a condition related to offers of cross-access and location and screening of dumpsters, and would maintain a condition about shielding light fixtures outdoors. And it would also maintain several prohibited uses. I'll note that landfill and kennels would be removed from the list of prohibited uses, and the reason for that is they are already prohibited in the CX district. The request would result in an increase of approximately 3 residential units that can be built on site and a small increase in office square footage. Otherwise, the the setbacks, build twos, and the max gross retail would stay the same. The site is within the boundary of the Wake Crossroads area plan. A portion of the site is within a transition area, while another portion is within what's considered the core area, which is intended for retail or expected to develop with retail uses. The request has a lower walk score than average, lower bike score than average, and lower job proximity than average. And it has an average transportation cost, but the site is not served by municipal or regional transit. The request would add to the housing supply, does not include subsidized units, permits a variety of housing types, allows smaller units, but is not within walking distance of transit. Area residents are more likely to be racial minorities compared to the city average and less likely to be low income. And median rent decreased by 23% between 2020 and 2021, but ACS data for this site is incomplete. The request is consistent with the community mixed-use future land use map designation, and the frontage which would be maintained on site is consistent with mixed-use center. So the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, and the urban form map. Consistent policies include those that are about reinforcing the urban pattern and buffering land uses in the Wake Crossroads plan. And inconsistent policies are related to response time standards for fire and parking design in Wake Crossroads. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is March 29th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. We'll now turn to public comment. The applicant and those in support have 10 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Carlos Cahill. I'm one of the applicants. So the reason we're here today is because we were trying to build a dealership with a mechanic shop at the front of the property, but there's an easement and we can't build under that easement, but how do I go back to that? Can I go back to the,
Use the arrows.
yeah. Okay, so number 4, maximum building setback of 20 feet wouldn't allow us to build it in the front. So we removed that, and then the parking we're trying to build the building in the back instead of the front because of that. So the parking would have to be put in front of the building, as well as the dumpsters. They also can't be behind. That's also why we removed that one. We do still intend to screen the dumpsters. And then the development, the residential part, it's going to be a mechanic shop and a dealership. So the mechanic shop is going to be a metal building, and that's really hard to put a lot of windows in, as well as there's already garage doors. So you can't put windows on those either. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public here to speak in support of this case? Okay, we'll reserve 8 minutes and 24 seconds for the applicant. Are there members of the public here to speak in opposition to this case? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it back to the table for commissioner questions and comments.
I have a couple
Commissioner Otwell?
questions. Thank you, Chair Bennett. I'm a little confused in the staff report. It seems that maybe some of these policies listed as consistent should be under inconsistent. Am I reading it wrong? For instance, APWC 8, the Wake Crossroads parking design is listed under consistent policies, but the policy says that parking should be behind building, and this request allows parking to move to the front of the building.
I'll need to double check the staff report. I'm standing in for this one.
Okay, sure. It's on page 10.
Are there other questions or comments while Mr. Burns is looking that up? Okay, then we'll wait.
And when you're finished, I would also like a little bit of discussion about the Wake Crossroads plan and its intent and application so far.
So I would need to maybe dig in a little bit deeper to review the policy and the plan, but it may be related to the fact that the condition is being removed, but the frontage is still being maintained. So there would still be parking between the building and the street, but that's just off the top of my head. I would have to look at it in a little bit more detail.
The policy states that parking should be located behind buildings. And this request would allow parking to move to the front of the building. And response time standards are also listed under the consistent policies. And I'm pretty sure the response time standard should be an inconsistent policy.
Hi, Hannah Recco, Planning and Development. I just want to clarify that you're referring to APWC3, the buffer land uses policy?
I was referring specifically to APWC 8, the Wake Crossroads parking design.
Yeah, that is listed as inconsistent.
I'm seeing that under inconsistent.
For the reasons you stated.
Okay, I'm sorry. You know what? I missed the subtitle. I apologize. Yep. I'm wasting everybody's time here.
I can speak briefly about the Wake Crossroads plan. It was adopted in 2005 and is area-specific guidance that rolled forward from the 1989 plan and the 2009 plan. If you think about what the Wake Crossroads area was like 20 years ago, I think you would understand the intent of the plan. I would say a lot of that so much development has happened there since then. Mm-hmm. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I'll
have a couple comments.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't really like these requests, and I think in general it degrades the pedestrian environment. On the other hand, the pedestrian environment in this area is pretty much lost cause. So it fits in with what's there. I would ask that transportation staff in the future consider using quantitative language in their descriptions instead of the qualitative language that's employed in some of these descriptions. For instance, let me see if I can get to the trade reviews. It talks about an NCDOT project that's going to upgrade the intersection and the traffic flow will improve the situation. I think that's up for the public to decide on an individual basis. For instance, a continuous flow intersection and increased traffic flow might not be considered an improvement from the perspective of pedestrian. So that's not going to affect my vote. I'll be voting to support this because it's consistent with our policy and our future land use map. But that was just a comment that I had. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Otwell. I'll entertain a motion. Well, I will say before we entertain a motion that my first home in Raleigh was just off of Mitchell Mill Road in this area. And the pedestrian experience is not good. As I recall, a few years ago, but I believe across from this is a current car auto shop anyway. So I'll be supporting this too because it seems consistent with what's there now. And as Bynum noted, the Wake Crossroads plan is very outdated. So I'll be supporting this. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Actually,
I'm
Ms.
so
Bennett, sorry. I too am very familiar with this area. My in-laws used to have a place on Blackley Pond. So I'm very familiar with this area. development is spreading east very quickly, and I don't think it's great development, quite frankly. I think the plan is consistent. I'm going to assume that there's some pretty stringent in-place environmental standards for garage and such, because to the east of Lewisberry is pretty rural, and there's some beautiful natural bodies of water in there. So I too will be in support of this, and I'm going to assume that it's a minor detail, but it's one that drives me crazy, that the applicant stated that the intention is to screen the dumpsters, but I think that's in the code anyway, so just confirming that.
I will need to check on dumpster screening requirements.
Commissioner Haver, do you need that answer before we make a motion?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's in there. It's pretty minor, but again, it's a small thing to ask in making some of these changes, so. If it takes more than 2 minutes, then the answer is no.
Okay.
We can approve it with me adding that comment so that it goes to council if we want to keep this moving, so not to put any more pressure on him, so let's keep rolling.
Okay. Are there any more comments or questions before I use the magic phrase? Then I will entertain a motion. Commissioner Fox.
In regards to case TCZ 4124, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 28th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Do I have a second? I'll second it. All those in favor? All opposed? That's unanimous, 7-0.
Just a quick follow-up. Yes, there are screening requirements for trash collection.
Don't worry about it, Shanita. We got it.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our second item, rezoning Z4024 2340 Compassionate Drive. We will receive a full presentation from Robert Tate.
Good morning again, Commission. Robert Tate, Planning and Development. This is rezoning request Z4024 at 2340 Compassionate Drive. This is a request to rezone less than 10 acres from R6 with the Special Highway Overlay District 1 to residential mixed use, 4 stories, conditional use. Your deadline for action is March 29th. So zoning in the area is predominantly residential with a mix of R4 and R6. Here is an aerial image of the site and surrounding land uses. So you can see north of Rock Quarry Road is largely low-scale residential, and south of Rock Quarry Road, there are a couple of different uses. Directly across from this site to the south is Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School. To the west of that and west of Creech Road is some moderate-scale residential, so some apartments. And then to the east of the high school is some commercial development. Here's a little closer look at the site. So currently today, the site is landlocked, so you can kind of tell from this image, but they would generally receive access from here, which is Compassionate Drive, this area. And here's a closer look at the street level. So because there are no public right-of-ways, this is as close as I can get to show you from the ground level, but the first image is looking from Southeast Raleigh High School, their entrance into Compassionate Drive. The second image is a bit closer. You can see on the right is the Granite Ridge neighborhood, and to the left are some homes within the Rockview subdivision. And then the bottom right image is looking from the opposite angle, so looking towards Southeast Raleigh High School and their entrance. So there are a handful of zoning conditions being proposed by the applicant. The first is a prohibition on various uses, specifically some residential uses. A couple to point out are single and 2-unit dwellings, and then a prohibition on all of the commercial uses that would be allowed in the residential mixed-use zoning district. The second condition would reduce the maximum amount of residential uses allowed on the site, so no more than 225 units would be allowed. The third would dedicate some open space so that at least 25% of the net site area would be dedicated as that. And the fourth is an affordable housing condition. It has some pretty lengthy language, but to sum it up, effectively rents will be no more than 30% of the household income of those individuals, and all units would have an average of 60% of AMI. The fifth condition would require a signal warrant analysis at Rock Quarry and Compassionate Drive after requesting the first certificate of occupancy. And the final condition, the sixth and final condition, would also require the property owner and developer to host a neighborhood meeting either before or 30 days after the submittal of a site plan. So the big change here, going from a residential district to a residential mixed-use district, so one big change would be an additional story being allowed within the district, so going from 3 to 4 stories. The increase of entitlement, so you saw that condition where they're limiting their residential unit count to 225. And then also, you would also unlock the apartment building type, which has some smaller setbacks. But I would also like to include that there are some neighborhood transitions that would be required. So this site and the surrounding census tract has a higher walk, transit, and bike score than average. It also has a higher transportation cost than average, which effectively means that transportation costs are lower than the citywide average. And then it has an average job proximity. So here's a reference of transit to the site. The Route 17, which is shown along Rock Quarry Road, is most close to the site. And then there's also the 7L along Atkins Drive, not necessarily walkable, but within the surrounding area. So this request would add to the housing supply, include subsidized units with that fourth condition, permits a variety of housing types, smaller units, smaller lots, and again, within walking distance of transit. Area residents in this census tract are more likely to be racial minorities than the citywide average. Also, they are more likely to be low income. Cost of rent, like most of the city, has increased, but in this census tract has increased at a much slower rate than average. So this request is inconsistent with the future land use map. Here, the designation is low-scale residential. The request is for a residential mixed-use district. Overall, consistent with the comprehensive plan, as I noted, inconsistent with the future land use map, and there's no urban form guidance, so there is no frontage also being proposed by the applicant. So there are a handful of consistent policies, largely speaking to compact development, providing some open space and new development, and then also dedicating some affordable housing on the site. Inconsistent policies largely talk about the inconsistency with the future land use map and compatibility with the existing surrounding built environment. And also just noting that this site is within an area of known fire service concern. So one outstanding issue that has been resolved, so at the publication of this meeting agenda, staff did receive unsigned zoning conditions and did not receive those until after this meeting agenda was published. So we have received that in time for you all to consider the conditions that I've gone over today. Just a reminder, your deadline for action is going to be March 29th, and you have a couple of meetings before then. And then really quickly before this goes back to you all, this would require a future land use map amendment. So the request, if it were to be approved, would go from low-scale residential to medium-scale residential.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Moving on to public comment, the applicant and all those in support have 10 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Amy Kraut. I'm an attorney at Smith Anderson. I'm representing the applicant, in this case, Standard Communities. I have representatives from the applicant as well as Compassionate Tabernacle of Faith, who's property owner, with us today. First, I just want to say thank you to staff. We've done a lot of work on this application, working with the Planning Department and Transportation Department to get it to where it is today. So what is Standard Communities? Standard Communities is a workforce affordable residential developer. They have 190 communities across the country, over 27,000 units. And they've recently been expanding into North Carolina, and this would be their first project in Raleigh. They are an affordable housing developer with a vision of being a nation in which you can't tell how much someone earns by looking at their home address. And their values are they act with kindness, they sweat the details, and they move with urgency. And we've seen that very much in this application process. So this rezoning is really to facilitate missing middle housing. As I mentioned, they're a workforce housing developer. I'll talk about it in a moment, but it's income restricted to 60% AMI. So what does this mean? You're targeting postal workers, elementary school teachers, police officers, social workers, electricians, and you're getting the rents down about 15 to 20% from the average. These are just some examples. They are based on 2024 data, so they're always subject to change. But this is about what you're looking at in terms of the annual salary of those types of employment groups in Raleigh versus what kind of a one-bedroom versus two-bedroom rental rate would look like at a 60% AMI with the condition. I think one of the things that we often talk about is, why different sites are selected for affordable housing development, and there really are some barriers to entry in terms of funding, because a lot of site selection for affordable housing can be difficult, and funding can be based on whether the property is in a QTC or DDA site. For a QCT site, those are set by HUD and the United States Treasury. They're often used to identify communities that are underserved or disproportionately impacted, and at least half the households have incomes below 60% of the AMI. And so this site meets these qualifications. It's a QTC site. So really, this is a partnership between Standard Communities and Compassionate Tabernacle of Faith. Partnerships between faith-based communities and affordable housing developers are becoming more common as both groups are working together to meet housing needs in the community. The church has been an active part of the community, and we're really looking how to use this 10-acre tract of land to positively impact the community, which led to this rezoning request. We have Reverend Burgess here today, along with some congregation members who will speak after I'm done. Partnering with the community and really looking at this site in particular, we are requesting an R6 with the SHOT overlay to RX4CU overview of the site. It's highlighted in red here. The church is the 10 acres directly north to it. There are residential communities surrounding it and nearby neighborhood mixed use and office uses. The site would be accessed, as Robert stated, from Rock Quarry Road via Compassionate Drive in red, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of comprehensive plan, we recognize that it's low-density residential, but apartments can be appropriate in these types of areas. And as you'll see when I go through the proposed conditions, we've really limited the development to try to bring it as close to in line with the area and make it more consistent with that neighborhood scale. It's also right outside a frequent transit area and transit emphasis corridor. There's a bus route right on Rock Quarry. So it's really an ideal location for affordable housing as it expands access to transit opportunities for the residents there. So we have a pretty robust set of zoning conditions already. This really goes back to Standard Communities kind of sweating those details. They're committed to being a good neighbor because they're going to be in the community for many years following the development of this project. So most of these conditions were added in response to different neighborhood concerns. So condition 1, really the big thing here is we've limited all commercial uses. We wanted to take out the, mixed use from this residential development. RX4 was really chosen for density and story purposes, not for height. So we've kind of pared down these uses to kind of signal this is for affordable housing. Condition 2, under RX4, I think the original kind of density would have been at 438 units. We've knocked that way down. This isn't just, a response to kind of neighborhood concerns. We don't want 438 units. The funding wouldn't support 438 units. So we're actually going to be closer to 200, if not a little bit below that. Condition 3, we recognize that the land is currently vacant and this would be a change. So we wanted to preserve 25% of open space. So you'll see from the concept plan what this kind of looks like. There are neighborhood transition yards that would be required of 50 feet to the west and to the south, and another neighborhood transition yard to the east that is also there. Where there's not plantings, we would end up supplementing some of those plantings. So trying to be really conscious about what the site ultimately looks like. And we put together this concept plan just recently as last week as part of our HFA application. So in terms of just kind of, so you can see a rendering, we put this together for this meeting. The facade detail obviously isn't there, but just kind of thinking about massing. These are going to be basically three 4-story garden apartments. Again, RX was not requested to get the 68 feet in height. It was just a quirk in the grading. There's some like below grade basement, so the 4 stories was necessary. But we're going to stay more towards that actual 50 feet in height if this gets approved and developed. So it's going to be more consistent with like an RX 3 stories. Affordability, we talked a little bit about this. This is 100% affordable development, and we wanted to go ahead and commit to that at 60% of AMI, targeting those kind of middle income workers. Traffic impacts, we spent a lot of time from the initial neighborhood meeting kind of reviewing what Compassionate Drive would look like. And we've worked a lot with transportation and are in conversations with NCDOT. Any development to this property, affordable housing or not, would require the improvement of Compassionate Drive because there is no public right-of-way frontage. And the goal is to develop it, improve it, and dedicate it over to the city. But safe access being one of the #1 priorities here, we are committed to doing that signal warrant analysis. We're already talking to NCDOT about that. To kind of make sure no matter what, you have safe ingress and egress to the site. Finally, within community engagement, again, committed to be a good neighbor and investing in the community. One of the things that we heard is, neighbors wanted to see more of a site plan, and that's hard in the affordable development context. There are lots of application reviews, lots of additional restrictions. And it's rezoning, not site planning. So what we've committed to is doing another neighborhood meeting following the rezoning process before the site plan, or right after the site plan is committed, to get additional feedback from neighbors. And just a couple things. These communities typically have innovative services provided on site at no additional cost to residents. Just want to touch quickly on timing. We are in the funding deadline kind of zone right now. In order to meet deadlines, we would need a rezoning by early April of this year. With that, I'm going to reserve the rest of my time for the church to come up and speak. And then we're happy to answer questions.
We only have 30 seconds left. Excuse me, I know we have to be mindful of time because we have other agenda items, but would the commission be interested in adding 2 minutes?
Yes.
Without objection, we'll add another 2 minutes to hear from the Reverend.
Well, thank you so much. Well, good morning, commissioners. I'm happen to refrain myself from saying brothers and sisters. I'm James Burgess. I'm the pastor of Compassionate Tabernacle Faith Baptist Church here in Raleigh. I'm here to represent, representing not just our congregation, but also our commitment to promote the well-being of our community. And with me, I have some of our leaders as well as some of our members. If it's okay, could I have them quickly stand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you would, Compassionate. Thank you. At Compassionate, we are deeply dedicated to uplifting our community. We are excited to partner with Standard Communities to address the critical need for affordable housing. The absence of safe, well-maintained, and affordable housing is a pressing issue that affects many, particularly those caught in the missing middle. Just last evening, a member of our congregation shared the story of a retiring relative who, despite their desire to live in Raleigh, had to leave due to the lack of affordable options. This personal account highlights the real challenges faced by many in our community. This housing initiative aims to provide alternative, affordable housing who are currently underserved now. We appreciate Standard's community's openness to our suggestions and ideas on how to integrate this new housing opportunity thoughtfully into our community. As we move forward, our Compassionate Church is eager to serve this new village in alignment with our vision. And our vision is to serve and to support.
Excuse me, Reverend Burgess. Bynum, there were 28 seconds on the clock when we added 2, so he has another 28 seconds.
10 more seconds. Together with them, we are hoping to create a thriving environment for all the residents of Raleigh. Thank you for your time and your consideration, and we sincerely hope you will support this important initiative.
Thank you, Reverend Burgess.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, those in opposition will have a total of 12 minutes and 28 seconds. Please state your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Keisha Lovelace. I am a child of the Rockview community, which is the closest area to this vacant land. I'm here with my mother, who just turned 80 years old on January 1st, here in the back. I also see other members of our community here, and I stand on behalf of my mother and my neighbors to speak on this. I did attend both of the public hearings in this matter, along with another 80 approximately residents from the surrounding area. The closest 2 neighborhoods, or 3 rather, is the Rockview subdivision, which has been there for more than 60 years. Granite Ridge, which is probably about 30 years, larger subdivision. And then there's a Southgate community that is also there. Glad I came this morning, because what we asked for at the public hearing was to see a rendering or the concept plan. None of that was presented to us. We're talking about a vacant land that is going to be developed that has remained not necessarily vacant for 80 years. It was owned by the Gervais family, and I'm going to give a quick history just so that you know. The Gervais family, emanating from Wilmington, North Carolina, started the Wilmington Journal, started the Carolinian newspaper. They were pioneers in Black newspapers in the Raleigh area, responsible for development of much of what you would consider historically Black household and residential areas, from Boylan Apartments, Martin Street, so forth and so on, in the 1940s and 50s. They built the Rockview community after is actually, when you looked at the picture, you saw vacant land there. That vacant area in the tree lot, it was an old golf course. It was the Tee Off Golf Club. It was the first Black-owned golf community and country club in Wake County during segregation, but they moved it. Mr. Gervais, P.R. Gervais, was one of the founding members of Meadowbrook, which is off of White Oak Road. It still exists today. Part of the reason they moved it was because the land was unsuitable to continue as a golf course. And I will get into that in a moment with our concerns. From that, once it still continued in some part as Mr. Gervais' own golf course. He used it while I was a child growing up, but part of that land was subdivided into the Rockview subdivision. Restrictive covenants were put in place in 1960. They expired in 1990, but it's basically half-acre lots. Minimum 1,200 square feet, but most of the houses there are much, much larger than that in the Rockview subdivision. You had old pioneers and elders of the black community, Dr. George Walker, who was the first black dentist in Wake County, Dr. Charles Holland, he was an optometrist and also the chair of the Wake County School Board many, many years ago. You had high school principals, firefighters, so forth and so on. And what they were doing was building a community with home ownership in the late 1950s, early 1960s, which has now continued on until today and now passing on. I'm one of the younger folks from my neighborhood. I'm turning 50 this year. I've got, calling my big brothers and sisters, they're in their 60s now. So we got an Asian community there with basically establishing, back in the 1940s and 50s, the foundation for generational wealth. What I'm concerned about today, there were primarily several concerns raised at the hearing and public meetings, and I want to preface my comments by saying that the current zoning of R6 is more than sufficient to provide affordable housing, townhomes, and apartments in this area. We do not need an R7-6 or 4, whatever it is, conditional use permit there. What I'm concerned about is my mother's home, and I'll start there, I would describe this area, when I say it's unsuitable to build, picture a bowl. My parents' house sits at the bottom of two hills, and if you look at that area from an aerial view that shows the topography, Compassionate Tabernacle is elevated. Granite Ridge is elevated. Southeast Raleigh High School is elevated. My neighbors in the Rockview subdivision are elevated. That stormwater runs down into and basically deposits right where they're getting ready to build these apartments. Now, during the public meeting, I raised concerns about, hey, what about the pond there? Now, you saw on the pictures a whole lot of trees there. I guess that would be the western part of the property. It was never that overgrown. What has happened since Mr. Gervais sold, and I will say Reverend Burgess was here, the founder of Compassionate Tabernacle was Reverend Giles, who was also a neighbor in the Rockview community. He founded the church, bought the land, and the church bought the land, I should say, from Mr. Gervais in 1990, about 3 years before his death. And they built the church up there. It was on the upper portion of it. I believe the lower portion where they're trying to build now was sold several years later by Mr. Gervais' daughter, Ms. Monroe, who recently passed away. And I will also say, while I'm talking about the land acquisition, Compassionate Tabernacle did not own Compassionate Tabernacle Road until December 30th of 2024. They've owned it for less than a month. And so we have heard nothing about how they're going to expand this area. That plot of land is completely landlocked. You saw in your report from the city that I read over the weekend about the response times. There is no way to get into that area. What they do is they go through Granite Ridge, go through a narrow neighborhood street, and go through a very narrow corridor, almost like an alley, to get to the church currently. So they just now purchased and acquired the ownership to it. If you go look at the deeds, what they had was a right of ingress and egress. The property remained owned by the descendants of Mr. Gervais, and that was closed off over the years. When it was growing up, I used to play on that road. It was a nightclub back there. Was all kinds of stuff before the church was going on. The country club was back there. Only one car could get down there. In order to widen that street, you're going to have to deal with probably about 3 or 4 more property owners to acquire land acquisition, to basically expand it and widen it for traffic. And that's also going to impact the stormwater piece. Dealing with the drainage from rainwater and things of that nature. Over the 53 years my folks have lived there, my father has had to deal with, he's passed away now, but I recall, heavy rainstorm, we're sucking water out. It comes up through the ground. When they built the house in 1972, it's a basement in the house. When they started digging the foundation, they struck water. The engineers had to dig until they got to dry ground, put 2 steel beams in, encase it in cement. So if you go into my parents' basement now, you see 2 brick pillars. Those are the steel beams upon which the foundation of the house was built because there's water there. When I asked during the public meeting, well, what about the pond? Because those trees weren't there. It used to be about 2 golf holes right back behind the houses. Behind my mother's house, the Whitakers and the Davises along TD Street. It's now overgrown. I was told that the pond is no longer there, the dam burst. But if you go to the North Carolina Division of Environmental Quality, look at the division water maps, you will see, and I have a picture of it, I printed it out, you will see where the water is pooled there. It is still there. The water just flows there. So my concern is when you put a 4-story building there, is it going to be sustainable? You're going to have to put a sump pump in. All of that area is now surrounded by housing. Where is the water going to drain to? Now, when my parents bought the house, they also, TD Street was being paved. They used the dirt to level it off. So when you do the grading, how is that going to flow? And our concern is that that water is going to basically flow into my mother's property, and eventually my property as well, flow into that property, causing flood issues. We are interested, and I'm glad to see
Excuse me,
about
just one moment. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to let you know there are 3 minutes and 50 seconds left. Are there others here who want to speak in opposition? I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak.
I'm gonna
Or are
finish up
you
in
speaking for everyone?
I think Ms. Talley wants to speak. I'm gonna finish in 30 seconds.
I'll yield my time to her because I'll yield my time to Keisha.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, again, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to
Yes,
make sure
ma'am.
we had enough time.
Yes, ma'am. We're concerned about the transition. I'm glad to see about things there. I would like to see some things to deal with the water runoff, whether it's additional natural barriers, whether it's water flow or water resources that basically controls the water flow. I would like to see fencing there. When Southeast Raleigh High School was opened in 1997, the kids would basically go through what was in an open area and cut through my parents' yard, go up Brenda Drive, which is directly across from the entrance. We want fencing there to prevent that from happening. We're concerned about transit. Yes, Rock Quarry Road was just widened right there. It was just completed, but the area is still congested. You have a large apartment complex that is down by Redeeming Love that was there. You have Word of God Fellowship that has some plans in the future there. And then the traffic study did not take into account the amphitheater that is down the street from this subdivision. Between April and September, when the concert series is going on, that traffic backs up to the Beltline for more than 2 miles. And so it still needs to have some things looked at. Even with Compassionate Drive opening up, what you're going to have is the entrance to Granite Ridge. You blink your eye, you're right at the Compassionate Drive. You blink your eye again, you're at Brenda Drive, which goes on Rock Quarry Road to the right. If you go in that direction, to the left is the entrance to Southeast Raleigh High School with over 2,000 students. There's only one sidewalk on one side of it, and there's a blind spot there. There's a curve, so you can't see. So you're going to have high school students crossing over in a blind spot with 3 quick roadways there, one right at the other, and I do believe that needs to be studied. And with that, I talked about transit, I talked about the height restriction. My parents' house is a split-level house. It's 2.5 stories. I believe I heard 50 feet. That is way too high. Like we said, the R6 that leaves it at about 40 feet, I believe it is more than sufficient there. It's consistent with the neighborhood. I know the church envisions some things, a daycare and a family life center, that be further off. We have no opposition to that. What we want to do is see a seamless integration into the existing community there. Like I said, there was those restricted covenants in place. The other thing that they envisioned was no commercial use in that area. I do realize that it has expired, those restrictive covenants, but it's residential with a predominantly elderly population. And it needs to be a seamless transition, and that's what we're looking for. And with that, it's about a minute left. I see, did I miss anything? Okay. Yeah, go right ahead.
Good morning. My name is Greta Gill, 2400 Brenda Drive in Raleigh. Keisha did not leave anything out. I am here to express my opposition to the project as well, based on the high density of traffic in the area that she mentioned, the amphitheater, high school, the neighborhoods where there are sidewalks on one side, not on the other. A project of that nature would involve students, I'm assuming, who will need to travel to that high school. So there would need to be a lot of improvements, I think, along Rockquire Road before you get to introducing something that would bring 225 units into the area. Are you all familiar with this area that we're speaking of? If not, I would invite you to go in the morning, rush hour traffic, see the impact of what's going on in the area right now, and then imagine adding the vehicle traffic of 225 more units in an area where the entrance and exit would not really accommodate traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that, I was furiously taking notes. I'll bring it back to the table for commissioner questions and comments. Who wants to start? Commissioner Fox.
I'm not exactly sure who to direct this to on staff. I'm noting in the staff report comment about at least one incident of downstream flooding. I wanted to better understand what the current development requirements would be related to stormwater to see if it would be appropriate to add something in addition to what's required by code.
Thank you. Sally Hoyt with Raleigh Stormwater. So this site would, due to the size, be required to meet our full stormwater requirements that address both water quality, so the amount of nutrients coming off the site, and the peak flow rate for the 2 and 10-year storms. The 10-year storm is about 5 inches of rain over 24 hours. And because there is a documented case of downstream structural flooding, the site would either have to show that they are less than 5% of the drainage area to that site, or provide additional detention on site for larger storms. This site would be subject to our newly revised stormwater requirements that came in November of 2024. So a couple of things that does that would address some of the public comments. One thing is it gives us the explicit ability to look at where the 100-year flood levels might be changed on properties other than the development site. So that would give us the ability to look at any changes to the water surface elevation on those upstream residential lots. It also provides some limitations on where the flow could be discharged. So it can't be discharged just to somebody's backyard. It would have to be into an existing jurisdictional stream or into a right-of-way or into a drainage easement. I do not know at this time whether the streams and the historic pond on site would be considered jurisdictional. That is regulated by the State Department of Environmental Quality. That is something that would be determined we would require the applicant to have DEQ come out and take a look as part of the development process.
And if they were determined to be under DEQ purview, what are the additional?
So if those, let me go back. So there's 2 channels on the site. If they were determined to be jurisdictional streams, they would need to have stream buffers, the first 30 feet, of which would have to remain vegetated in, if it's currently forest, it would have to remain forest. DQ also evaluates existing ponds and lakes and determines whether they are jurisdictional. If I was not familiar with the dam being breached or letting water through, but if that is the case, sometimes they'll find that there's wetlands there, and that might cause some of that area to be protected. But again, that's something that an applicant team would work with the state to figure out, and that's routinely done as part of the development process.
Other questions? Oh, go ahead. Keep talking.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Apologies. I'm wondering if the applicant team, if you could pull up your potential proposed layout, and if someone on the team could indicate where those streams are.
Yes.
That'd be helpful.
I'm going to pull up Matt Louder from our development team.
Yes. Good morning. My name is Matt Louder. I'm with Bowman Consulting, 4006 Barrett Drive. So you can see, and maybe you can see my cursor on this. So everything from the site is flowing from east to west, like the ladies mentioned. You can see on the concept plan that we do have this area in blue. That is where everything basically is draining to today. So basically coming through this way, and then I believe it's coming up to our northwest corner is where all the drainage is currently discharging. There was an existing pond on the site. That dam has been breached. And so our intent, and we do have a consultant looking at the environmental currently, that's ongoing. So like she mentioned, if there are streams or wetlands, we'll definitely account for that. But our goal is to basically replace that existing pond with our new stormwater facility that will be built in accordance with city standards. Basically, it'll be a lot more safe out there just because it is a breach situation. So we will be able to control all the stormwater that is currently flowing through there, plus accounting for all the impervious that is coming from our site. So this pond will be designed to handle the current conditions as well as the future conditions. But yes, basically, like I mentioned, everything is flowing east to west in this general direction towards this corner. The existing pond is basically where we have the parking lot shown now. And so we don't have any buildings proposed over that area. She's right, it could be a little bit of a structural issue, so we want to avoid that with where we have the buildings proposed.
So if those streams are determined to be jurisdictional waters under DEQ purview, what I'm hearing is it would require a different layout than what's proposed?
Correct. And this is a concept plan.
Okay.
Yes, if there are streams or buffers there, we would have to accommodate those and work around those areas, maybe reconfigure this layout. Again, this is conceptual at this point, but our goal is to replace that pond and put it there, but it can change, of course.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Raines?
Yes, I think this question is for the applicant for clarification. Some of the neighbors of concerns are related to height adjacent to the adjacent single-family homes. A comment was made that the proposed development would include 4 stories, but because of the layout, it would aesthetically appear to be 3 stories. Looking at the the description of what a story is, it's related to the average height from grade. So if this were to get approved, you could still have 4 stories all around the building. So if the applicant can clarify the need for 4 stories versus 3 stories.
I'll do my best. As a civil engineer, not an architect, but basically what we're looking at, like I just mentioned, the site is draining from east to west. There's roughly 20 feet, maybe a little bit more fall across the site. And so what we're proposing to do is basically have a split in these buildings. So again, if you can see my cursor, if you basically bisect those buildings, everything on the east side would be a 3-story building, just a traditional 3-story building. We would continue that roof line towards the west, but basically add a 4-story but going down. And so if you're in this parking lot on the back side of the site and you looked at the buildings, you would see 4 stories. And basically it would go 4 stories for this half of each building. And then As the grades transitioned up, we would go to 3 stories. So the appearance, the roof line would stay straight. The view from the eastern side of the site would be 3 stories. It's just trying to take advantage of the grade by adding a story at the bottom part of the buildings.
Thank you. That helps clarify that. So in the middle of the site, the neighbors to the south would have views to a 4-story building, essentially.
Correct. Yeah, if you just imagine the buildings kind of being bisected, you know, one side would be 3 stories, one would be 4 stories, but the 4-story would go down kind of like a basement.
Understood. Thank you.
Other, Commissioner Peeler?
I got a number of questions, but I think while we're on this, just with the retention pond being in that, it looks like the property to the east of that pond, it looks like 2033 Atkins Drive. It looks like that backyard of that property is even lower than the lowest point in that corner. So I'm not a topography expert, but it seems like even putting a pond in that corner, you'd still have downstream flooding to that house, which is lower than anything on this property. To the west, sorry, is what I meant, yeah. This is the very northwest corner of this property is where 2033 Atkins adjoins it.
Is your question for the applicant or for stormwater staff?
I think it's for stormwater staff because I'm curious if that's the example of the downstream flooding that was recorded.
And if I may tag on to that, Ms. Boyd, I heard you say with the new stormwater requirement, there are limitations of the discharge point. And would that address this? I wasn't quite clear.
So under the new rules, if that's a jurisdictional stream that goes through the backyard of 2033 Atkins, then they could discharge it because it would be considered to be an existing water body that's an established flow path. They would still have to meet the detention requirements on site. But the idea is that by meeting those detention requirements, it shouldn't increase the water level on that downstream lot. If that were not a jurisdictional stream, then they would need to take some additional measures such as obtain an easement if there wasn't an existing easement on that pipe.
And to be clear, what needs to happen before we could know that it's a jurisdictional stream?
So typically a consultant will go out and determine that themselves, but the ruling comes from DEQ. Depends on how backlogged their office is, how long it takes, but I've seen it take anywhere from a week to a couple of months for them to be able to come out and determine that on site. But I would say these are issues that are common to be addressed during the development process. I have not seen rezoning conditions come out about those topics. Commissioner Fox, did you have a separate question?
No, I think that addressed it. I was a little bit concerned about the potential for flooding, but I do believe the new requirements related to quantity specifically would address those.
Does the applicant have a response as well?
Yeah, if I may, I'm going to call up Matt Louder just to answer any questions. We did submit a drainage easement exhibit with our application showing that we met we were under that 5% requirement. So if you have any questions about that specific drainage easement, drainage exhibit that we provided, Matt can answer those as well. But we were under the requirements.
Thank you. Commissioner Fox or Peeler, did you have a specific question for the applicant?
Not on that subject.
Okay. Commissioner Lampman?
I just am curious about the specific language tied to the affordable housing provisions.
Can you speak into your mic? I didn't hear the last.
I'm sorry. I'm curious about the specific language that pertains to the affordable housing restrictions.
Okay. What's your concern?
It just is, it's very general and broad in nature. It just says that affordable housing, according to the restrictions here within, or something like that, but it didn't really say. I assume that means that whatever LURA is tied to the property, that's what they're adhering to, but I'm wondering if we could tie the zoning itself to the affordable housing restrictions that they're planning on committing to with the state agency.
So the condition language that's in the slide is not the entirety of that language, just for brevity purposes. So after that particular sentence, there is a declaration of restrictive covenants for affordable housing in a form approved by the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency shall be filed and recorded in the property's chain of title in Wake County's Register of Deeds prior to receiving the certificate of occupancy. And the 60% medium income is determined by HUD. So we pulled these from other conditions used by the city, and we can have Robert Tate or someone come up, but this is a pretty standard affordable housing condition that is tied to just restrictive covenants.
Attorney York.
I was just going to say, if you look on page 24 of the primary
thank you.
backup
Thank you.
document in the agenda, you'll see the wording.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Does that address your question, Commissioner Lampman? Okay. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Fox.
Just one final question. Just going to acknowledge one of the speakers had mentioned Compassionate Drive, and that being dedicated as right-of-way. It's currently, I guess, a private road. What would the width requirement of that be upon expansion? That might be a staff question. It might be an applicant question.
Yeah, so the smallest right-of-way is 55 feet for a neighborhood yield road. The right-of-way width for Compassionate Drive is 50 feet right now, but we've talked extensively with Raleigh Planning and Transportation about what design alternatives would look like. There is enough space in that 50-foot right-of-way to put 2 lanes, ingress, egress, with at least 1 sidewalk, if not 2 on each side, and some streetscaping and buffering. We would end up probably having to do a design alternate for this, but again, very extensive discussions with transportation, and they can speak more to it. But we are committed to making sure that it's safe and not having to acquire any additional land from the neighboring property owners.
Can we go to the map that shows Compassionate Drive? That would just be helpful if we're going to talk about transportation, which I think we might.
Do you want like
that one?
This here? Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions, comments? Commissioner Haber, you look like you have something.
Yeah, you know, my MO, I like to go last because normally I'll cover everything I want to ask, so I'm just keep going.
Okay. While we're talking about transportation, I noted the fire service issue, which we've talked about that at length, and I understand there's a master plan being developed. What struck me was the ability of large fire trucks to get to this site. Is that a concern? I'm asking transportation staff, or is anyone here from fire?
Carter Robertson with Transportation. I'm not quite too sure about the amount of roadway needed for a fire engine to get down, but what they had proposed, or the applicant had proposed in our meeting with them, was 27 back to curb, so that's 2 13.5-foot travel lanes. So that part's in alignment with our UDO cross sections. I'm not sure if that would cover a fire engine though.
Okay. So let's say it doesn't.
Satisfy code requirements. It's going to, part of the code requirements are written to satisfy fire requirements. So if they're satisfying code requirements, it would satisfy fire requirements.
Okay.
And given the site plan that they showed and generally how circulation would function on a site with this disposition with a flag pole access like this, there's going to be adequate turnaround, and that's going to be required as part of the site design review with
Thank you.
Development Services staff.
Thank you, Bino. Commissioner Peeler?
I have a question about, I apologize, this is a question for staff, and I do not know this in the UDO. Under RX4, are there any requirements for a lot this size to have tree conservation percentage at all?
Tree conservation is tied to lot size, not zoning, and this is more than the minimum acreage limit that would trigger tree conservation.
What would that be? What's the percentage?
I would have, I don't know that off the top of my head. We'd have to do some research.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is just, oh, sorry, were you about to?
No.
Oh, okay. You're moving the mic. I thought you were about to say something. My question for that is just, I mean, I think with anything that's multifamily and of that size, and I think it's a particular issue in Southeast Raleigh, is tree coverage. And I'm just interested to know what can be added to improve that, because otherwise this will obviously be clear cut and there's quite a few trees on it. I know there's the 25% open space, but that doesn't cover, you can grade open space. So I would love to know what that is and if that can be, improved in any way. It's hard to know if it needs to be improved if we don't know what it is, but that's the reason I bring it up.
So I believe I heard a question about the TCA requirements.
Yeah.
So the requirement for any districts outside of R1 and R2 would be 10%.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tate.
And can I ask a quick follow-up question? To be clear, that TCA requirement, is that 10% of what's currently planted, or can things be graded and then replanted and counted as tree conservation?
I believe the latter, but I would like to get confirmation from stormwater staff for you.
Not a stormwater question, really.
Just with the 10% TCA that would be required here.
The 10% is based on the acreage of the property.
Right. Does the definition of that tree conservation mean that it cannot be graded from what the current trees, 10% of something that's currently there, or can it all be graded and then replanted?
TCA is preserved. You can't grade it and replant it.
Okay. So that would require 10% of the property not be graded during development, essentially.
Right.
Got it. Thank you. That's my question.
Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you, Chair Bennett. Normally, I'm pretty opposed to zoning for mixed use and then taking all the mixed use out. The intent is to have a walkable community, and I think that benefits lower income households don't have to drive as much and perhaps not own two cars. In this case, I think given the significant dedication to affordable housing and the fact that this is a church with trying to leverage their property for the common good, and this is a huge opportunity across our city and our region, and I would like to see more churches take this kind of action. I'm prepared to support this application and at a time when somebody's ready to make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Otwell. Lampman, then O'Haver.
I was just making sure no one was going to make a motion, saying Mr. Otwell was pushing us on there, so
We will not make a
I will
motion
reserve my
until
comments
I
again till the end.
say I will entertain a motion. So you're good.
I think you're safe, Brian. All right. I just want to make a general comment about, this is affordable housing is challenging to get done regardless. The funding needs are extraordinary. So as the developer is looking to pursue a larger development like this, especially on sites where there isn't just much availability anymore. And so I'm grateful to the commitment that comes into providing affordable housing at a standard that we really need and want to see for ongoing support of our communities. This will be, an expensive endeavor to make sure that all of this is, supported. But it's one where in affordable housing, people persevere and they're able to still be committed to the cause and providing housing. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lampman. Commissioner O'Haver?
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Just a couple of things, and most of y'all have touched on this, but I just want to clarify. Getting back to the zoning of RX versus R6, Ms. Lovelace had mentioned that it's sufficient, and I do have a question. I'm assuming that the RX is what allows the apartments versus the R6. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So then the RX, the height is, what's the existing height is 40 feet and the proposed height is 50 feet, is that correct?
The proposed height would allow 68 feet.
Was there a condition, remind me, or did the applicant just mention that it was going to be 50 feet?
The applicant mentioned, and they can provide additional context, that their structure should not be
But that's
up to
not
68
that's
feet.
not in the zoning conditions.
That's right.
I appreciate the 50-foot transition yard. Y'all beat me to the comment on that. I do understand the grading and the 3 stories to the front. As the grade drops away, it ends up being 4 stories to the back. I know it's a concept plan. I do think that gives enough buffer for the adjacent parcels, but I do remember 4 or 5 years ago, we've changed the way we measure height to be able to look at the entirety of the building versus just what's along the public right-of-way. And so I would just encourage the applicant to look at that and see if there are ways that we can just minimize the areas where it's 40 feet. So that's just an ask. But to pick up on the stormwater, I also am not a stormwater guru, but I am looking at the topography. And to Commissioner Peeler's point, there's a 258 contour that sits down there with nothing lower, and it is sitting on the adjacent property. So I am curious how the applicant is going to deal with that. That's great that we've got new requirements in place that retain the water. It's not released any faster than current, but there's still nowhere for that water to go. So I don't care how slow we're releasing it. Where's that water going?
Yes, and I can appreciate that. I don't know if we have the overall map of the watershed available, but I do believe everything does continue to go generally east to west. We did, like Amy mentioned, do a study of where we are as far as the total watershed, and we are less than that 5%, so we're a small part of the overall watershed. But we will obviously work as we do the environmental studies of the site, look at where it is draining, make sure it's not a wetland, and just deal with it appropriate with state and local requirements.
I appreciate that, and I understand IMAPS is not exact.
Right.
But I don't see on IMAPS where the water continues going.
Yeah, and not
here
assuming
comes
it's-
stormwater, so Ms. Hoyt looks like she's going to set me straight
Sally
here.
to the rescue.
Sally to the rescue.
Yeah, Sally Hoyt, Raleigh Stormwater. So I'll just show you, I'm looking at something on my screen that shows the storm drainage. So basically, in this lot that's along Atkins Drive, there's a little bit of a channel, and then it goes into a 30-inch pipe. Then it heads west and ends up in a 48-inch pipe along, I believe this is Crawford Road, before heading north along Crawford Road into a stream. So there's basically an existing storm drain network through Southgate that the existing flow from here enters in the backyard of this house on Atkins Drive.
Thank you, that's clarifying. Is that easement, maybe I don't have that layer turned on IMAPS, is that a public easement, maintained public easement, or is that a channel that's running through a parcel?
I don't know the easement status. It would, in general, depend on the development date of the Southgate neighborhood, whether an easement had been required or not.
I'd be curious about that, and I'd also be curious about if that channel is what's causing some of the flooding issues, because, again, releasing the water at the same rate that it is now, if there's a current problem, we can build the pond as big as we want to, but if we're releasing at the same rate, there's going to be a continual issue. And I think there are a lot of cases that come before us, especially in some of the outlying neighborhoods and the lower income neighborhoods, where it was developed not necessarily taking into account the conditions of the neighbors, meaning doesn't mean it's the right way for stormwater to work. And we talk about that on other projects. And so I'm obviously in favor, appreciate the church and the applicant on what you're doing, and I want to see this project move forward, not at the expense of the adjacent neighbors. And so personally, I would like to understand a little bit more about the stormwater, the topography, and how we're dealing with that in that area. And I understand it's a concept plan, DEQ can come in, so on and so forth. But once it leaves this commission, we don't have another say about it. So I've got some concerns about the stormwater, looking at IMAPs. I'd like to see the applicant come back and demonstrate that they can sufficiently deal with that issue, or if it's a public easement that's public maintained and there's not additional burden on the adjacent property owners, that'll change my perspective considerably.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Haver. Go ahead.
I did get an additional piece of information from my coworker that he did evaluate the map that was submitted, and that the site composes 9.5% of the watershed to the downstream structural flooding location, which would mean that the additional controls on site would be required.
Does that address your concern, Commissioner O'Haver, or is there more information or additional conditions that you would request of the applicant?
I think we've talked about what those additional requirements are enough in other cases. So my general understanding of that additional requirement that I wasn't presented earlier makes me feel better about how that's going to be addressed, because I didn't see it being addressed previously. So.
And Sally, could I call you up one more time? And the additional requirements that it would be subject to, because we have so many members of the public here, could you just at a high level just kind of go through them so they know what they are?
So it basically applies additional detention requirements. So instead of the 10-year storm, or that 5 inches of rainfall being the maximum amount of rainfall to be analyzed, greater amounts of rainfall, the 25 and 100-year storm, have to be evaluated. And so that's more like 8 inches of rainfall that would have to be evaluated, and they couldn't discharge a higher rate for that larger storm from the property.
But correct me if I'm wrong, I thought also because just because we're detaining a higher rate storm, the pond's getting bigger, if the discharge rate is still the same that exists now and there's a problem now, we need to deal with the discharge rate. And I thought those additional requirements when there was downstream flooding adjust.
Yeah. So the way the code language is set up is that it's holding the development site to not making the conditions worse. It is not holding individual development sites to addressing the existing problems downstream. Those are actually, the way that we get these locations is that it's people who have come to the city to request assistance, and so they're on a list to be funded. So that might be upsizing pipes or improving channels or regrading things. So they're in a queue of projects to be completed by the city.
Thank you for clarifying for that for me, because I don't know that it does. And again, just because it's what's existing doesn't mean it was right when it was developed.
Yeah.
And so, and again, to standard communities, very few times, this is a really weird planning commission meeting for me because I voted against taking away the dash lines, which I always do. And I constantly am arguing about not a need to increase costs for stormwater because it's expensive. Typically, though, the stormwater is dealt with, and in this particular situation, I'm not confident enough that it is. So I'm not trying to add costs. I understand the importance of that. I typically don't deal with stormwater issues because code generally deals with it. But in this particular case, I'm not sure I've gotten enough information to make an informed decision on whether or not it's being dealt with. That's my one issue on this.
Commissioner Lampman?
I think we had a recent affordable housing case where the developer had made some additional commitments to the stormwater and wetlands conditions there, and there may be some ideas or some solutions built into those zoning conditions that might be of reference. I think it was the Strickland Road rezoning earlier this year, or last year. So just as a frame of reference as you're going back and looking at updating zoning conditions for flooding.
They may not have to. I mean, that's just my perspective. Y'all might not have that same feeling right now, so I don't know that it's necessarily.
No, I
be
think
deferred.
I agree with you. Yeah, I never want to vote against an affordable housing project. I really appreciate seeing the partnership with the church. I appreciate the work that's been done with the community, but I also heard the concerns of the neighbors, and I don't want to do harm to the community that's already there. So if there is something that the applicant could do or could look at doing to make us comfortable that we aren't exacerbating really a harm that was already done, then I think that would make us more, I'll speak for myself, make me more comfortable. I'm all for the project, the rezoning, but I just want to make sure, as Ms. Lovelace said, it's a seamless transition and that this is an asset to the neighbors who are already there and it doesn't create other impacts. That's sort of where I am. So I don't think I would be ready to move forward right now without seeing more information and perhaps some more discussion about stormwater and additional conditions. I think this might be one of those cases where above and beyond is appropriate. Any other questions or comments? Does the applicant want to respond?
If I can.
You can.
We completely understand your concerns about stormwater, and we take those very seriously. One of the only things that we would say is we are on a very strict funding deadline, and if we don't hit our April rezoning with increasing interest rates and everything else, this project might not be a possibility. So we are very willing to move forward with a recommendation for City Council to study this and come back to them with a full report and to really analyze this issue. That's not a problem. We are a little concerned about timing. And just wanted to make you aware of that.
I understand that. Commissioner Littman, did you want to?
The NCHFA application, LIHTC application deadline, which is like May something.
So it's right here. So HTF is early April, and then NCHFA is May.
Thank you
so,
for that.
Yep.
So we could talk about voting this out with some sort of recommendation to council, for approve, deny. I guess we could vote it out with no recommendation, explaining to council why, what is the will of the commission. Commissioner Fox.
I'd be comfortable voting it out with an approval with the additional request for some additional stormwater conversation with the council.
I agree.
Okay, I think I'm going to go the other way, yes.
May I have 30 seconds just to say one thing?
Hold on
after
just
I've heard
one
some
moment.
questions?
We would have to vote to do that since the hearing part of this is closed. Does the commission want to grant 30 more seconds to each side? Okay. Without objection, I'll give the opposition. Bynum, could you give Ms. Lovelace an additional 30 seconds, please? Thank you.
I just want to say on behalf of my neighbors who are here and in the community, thank you for the conversation. We learned more today than we did in the public meetings. I understand the time pressures with financings and things like that. The first public meeting was in August, the second in December, approximately a month ago, and we did not see any of this. And the questions that you have asked this morning is what the questions that the neighbors asked. I would ask that this information be shared with the neighbors because you highlighted on the concerns and we received no information. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant want 30 seconds to respond, or are you good?
No, we appreciate the Planning Commission and your comments this morning. There are things that we're actively addressing. We would ask that you recommend approval with those additional stormwater concerns. To Commissioner O'Haver's point, we're also willing to look at the height and put additional restrictions on there if you wanted to add that to a recommendation for approval as well. We're open to that. But we thank you. We're willing to open and communicate with the neighbors. So we want to continue and move forward with this really good project for the city. Thank you.
Thank you for that follow-up. I'm probably still going to vote denial. I want the project to move forward. It's going to pass, but if we don't send that message to council, there's an opportunity that it's not talked about because we've sent stuff to council before that's not addressed. And so I just want to go ahead and preempt my denial that I'm 100% for the project. I want to see it move forward. I understand the funding, the timing, I understand all that. It's really more a message to the council to make sure that they address it. So I just want to preempt my denial vote with that.
Thank you for that, Commissioner O'Haver. I think I agree with you. With that, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Otwell?
I have a question for Mr. York. Looking at the consistency statement, will this motion require an additional statement to update the future land use map, the comprehensive plan?
I believe the statement includes that.
Yeah, the statement should include that, and it does require an amendment to the comprehensive plan.
It does? Okay.
Yes.
I thought it did.
The answer is yes, if people are.
The motion to deny had an issue, but if it's a motion to approve, you can just go answer.
Okay. So I feel a little bit uncomfortable speaking for the folks that would like additional request for additional stormwater requirements. So I'm not sure exactly how to word that. If somebody else would like to make the motion or make a suggestion, I'd be happy to do so.
I think it's probably just going to be me, but I can't recommend approval and then vote against my own recommendation. So
Okay,
It's
so-
been done before.
actually, it has been done before. It wasn't me, though.
So I'll go ahead and give it a shot, and we can vote it down if y'all don't like it. With respect to Z 40-24, that make sure that we're on the
Yep.
right one. Oh. All right. I think I clicked the wrong one. Yeah, there we go. With respect to Z 40-24, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated January 28th, 2025, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. The Planning Commission includes a request that the applicant, return with additional studies and potential conditions related to enhanced stormwater and consider limiting height on the western portion of the property. After considering the policies, maps, and other materials included as part of the comprehensive plan, the Planning Commission determines that the proposed zoning amendment is for a zoning district that closely corresponds with the development envisioned in the land use plan. Am I reading the right one?
You don't need to read all of them.
Okay.
That is inconsistency.
Yeah.
Oops. Oh, jeez.
Here we go. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Otwell has made a motion to approve with some additional language. Commissioner Fox has seconded. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. All opposed? That's 5-2. Commissioner O'Haver, would you like to restate your opposition?
I think Shanita's got it. I think I was pretty verbose in my comments, so.
You were very verbose. And I agree with Commissioner O'Haver. I came here fully prepared to support this. And I have been comfortable in the past moving something to council with a note that they consider something because the developer was on a timeline. But with this one, I have some concerns about the neighborhood. And I feel like seeing the two opposing votes might make council think about this and make sure that enhanced stormwater conditions are considered. I don't want us to do harm to existing communities as we're trying to do good to address the affordability problem. I think the existing community is an important consideration as well. So with that, the vote was 5-2 to recommend approval to City Council. Thank you all very much for showing up. Thank you for your comments. Moving on to our final item under new business, rezoning Z4524, 7015 and 7019 Litchford Road. We will hear from Mr. Tate.
Give it a second. All right.
Okay.
Robert Tate again with Planning and Development. So this is rezoning request Z4524 at 7015 and 7019 Litchford Road. This is a request to rezone just shy of an acre from R4 to R6 with some conditions, and your deadline for action is March 29th. So zoning in the area is predominantly residential with a mix of R4, R6, and R10, and then there's also a apartment complex that's zoned RX3 with some conditions just to the north and east of the site. So here's an aerial of the site and surrounding land uses. So this site was originally a part of the North Ridge subdivision. So to the west of the site is the golf course and North Ridge community. To the south is predominantly some low-scale residential with a mix of detached single-family homes and townhomes. And then across Litchford Road on the east is a conglomeration of apartment complexes that are within the moderate scale residential designation. I'd also like to note that a little more than 1,000 feet to the east as well is a complex of industrial and warehouse uses. Here's a closer look at the site. And we're looking at the site from the ground. So the first image is at the intersection of Litchford Road and Hunting Ridge Road. You can see this lot is the 7019 lot, which is vacant. And on the bottom right is the 7015 lot, which has a single family home. And here's a closer look at the 7015 lot. And the applicant has proposed one condition, and that would require specific materials for the exterior walls. So that's brick, natural cultured stone, and fiber cement siding. So the change here is really an increase of entitlement. This would also allow a 45-foot townhome. So that's also just a gentle increase in height for the structure. And then also some relief in these setbacks allowed for a principal structure. So this site and the large area around it has a lower walk score and lower bike score, also lower transit score than average, has a higher transportation cost index and higher job proximity than average. This would add to the housing supply, does not include subsidized units, would continue to permit a variety of housing types, smaller units, smaller lots, and again, not within walking distance of transit. This census tract is less likely to have racial minorities than the citywide average, and is also less likely to have low-income households than the citywide average. And rent is increasing at a similar pace as the citywide average. So this request is consistent with the future land use map. The zoning being requested is R6, which falls in line with the low-scale residential designation. So just to wrap all of this up, consistent with the comp plan, consistent with the future land use map, no urban form guidance. Here are a list of consistent policies, largely speaking to the compatibility of development that could be produced in this zoning district with the surrounding properties. No inconsistent policies were identified, and your deadline for action is going to be March 29th. Available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Moving on to public comment, the applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Tamara Waitman with BA Folk on behalf of the applicant. Tall Pines Custom Homes is interested in developing some luxury townhomes on this site. It is right there between Litchford and Hunting Ridge. Hunting Ridge goes right there into million-dollar homes, multi-million-dollar homes. So this site is, we're seeing it as a transition between these lovely townhomes that are at the bottom here in the landings, which are over $500,000, and then just north of the site are the $2, $4, $6 million homes. We're looking at having, if you look here at the plan, 8 homes that will be luxurious townhomes with 2-car garages behind them, so that they would be facing Litchford, and then the homes would be facing over the golf course so that the people who live there can appreciate the amenity of having the golf course right there. Looking at the neighborhood in general, there are apartment complexes up to the northeast. As was mentioned, there's industrial area over off of Litchford Road. It's a very varied area, but we think that this provides a nice transition between some of the extremely high-end homes and then the more moderately priced homes that are to the south and east. I do have with us today the developer, David Phillips, is available if you have any questions for him as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other members of the public here who wish to speak in support of this case? Okay, then we'll move on to those who are opposed. You will have a total of 10 minutes. Please state your name when you before you begin your comments.
Good morning. Andy Pettish, Pettish Law, 1217 Stowage Drive in Cary. I'm here on behalf of Brantley Powell. He and his wife own property 2515 Landings Way, which is the immediately south of this project, those townhomes. It's the townhome that's closest to Litchford Road. I want to just preface my comments by saying Mr. Powell is not blanketly opposed to the development of this property. He's a developer himself. He lives in townhomes. He is very aware of not wanting to present a double standard in his position here. But there are some concerns that I think need to be addressed in this application. And so I want to just quickly go over those with the commission. The first, and let me see if I can find potentially a better, well, this may be the best one here, this plan. The proposed design layout, I understand this is probably still a concept plan, although looks like there's been some pretty significant engineering done in this drawing, is that the uniqueness of recombining these two lots, you're going to have an orientation where the front and backyards, where it's going to front the golf course, apparently, I just heard that from the applicant, and then have the rear yard being facing Litchford Road, is then going to be perpendicular to the townhomes to the south who have their rear yards abutting that southern property line of the subject property. So you're going to have a side-facing property there right up against those backyards, which are fairly close to that rear line with the way that was designed originally and approved and constructed. So I think that there needs to be some very close consideration to how that is buffered between those two projects, because as Mr. Tate indicated, there's an increase in height here, going up to 45 feet. And it's my understanding that these are going to be proposed to be 3 stories, and the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong about that. So, and the existing homes are I believe just 2-story there. And so you're looking, and in addition to that, the topography is higher. This proposed site is higher, and it rolls off towards the land to the south there. So you're looking at a pretty extreme elevation change in terms of the built environment and what's viewed from the rears of those homes. In addition, Mr. Powell's property is going to be, and I don't know if it's not completely clear here in this drawing, but there is, I believe, where the proposed stormwater management, I believe this will probably be a detention pond located here in this southeast corner of the property. That will be right across from where Mr. Powell's property is. So one other concern is where the discharge of that pond is going to be, and if that's going to be onto Litchford Road into that stormwater catchment system and not going to discharge into his property, which, assuming that this is only going to be built to the 10 and 2-year storm as minimally required by the existing code, then you've got to ensure that when there is a discharge for storms that exceed that there's no significant impacts for those southern and easternmost properties in the adjacent development. So again, this orientation, and one thing to note here, that the setbacks for R6 would be 20 feet. And I don't know how the city would actually interpret this as a new question. I just found out this is going to be reversed, but how the different front and rear setbacks, how are you going to apply? I don't think the orientation of the house is necessarily going to dictate what's the rear yard. And so you have a 20-foot setback, but only a 10-foot setback on that side yard. Now, in the existing zoning, there's also a 10-foot setback, so that doesn't change, but this is an increase in density. And they are looking to maximize this layout, which is going to push these homes right up to that 10 feet. So I know that if there is a different configuration that could be worked out, I talked about this with Mr. Powell, and he would support, if there can be an agreement, any variance that would allow for a different configuration to encroach into those rear yards as well, to ameliorate the proximity of this development to the existing development nearby, and which would also further help that height differential. And then there is an existing mature Leland cypress stand that runs across that. It's not clear, talked about this with Mr. Powell, he's not clear yet as to whether that is on the subject property or on the existing townhome property, but to the extent that it's on the subject property, we would want that to remain, but then also incorporate new plantings that would grow and help to supplement that, especially because Leland cypresses planted in a row like that can be subject to ice storms, breakage, and so in another 4, 5, 6 years, that could, even though it's providing a decent screen now, could be removed with just one quick winter storm.
They're dead. Those Leland cypresses need to be removed.
Oh, excuse me. He has the floor right now.
And I'll wind up so that other people can provide their comments as well. But there are, a handful of important issues I believe need to be addressed. And again, a lot of it stems from the uniqueness of the orientation of this lot to the existing lot and the number of lots that the applicant is trying to create. So with that, I would respectfully request that the current version of this application be recommended for denial. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there others who wish to speak in opposition? Okay, thank you. Please state your name.
Yes, thank you. My name is Lori Jones. I'm an attorney at Jordan Price, 2710 Wycliffe Road in Raleigh. I'm here representing the Landings of Northridge Homeowners Association, and I do have here in the audience some board members and/or all board members. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Members of the board of directors. We have some very similar points to those raised by counsel for Mr. Powell. I'll just start out by saying we are thankful that the request changed from R10 to R6. We are concerned about the density. There are 8 units that are shown on the proposed plan at this point in time, but I would note that up to 13 could be placed unless the applicant were to agree to some condition limiting the number of units. That is concerning for several reasons. Stormwater is a potential issue. There is a history of flooding in the units, and council explained this, but the Landings is directly south of this site. And so there are several townhomes that would be directly impacted. And so increased density, increased impervious is going to have an effect on stormwater. And we just don't have information that I'm aware of, that the board is aware of how that is going to be handled. And it certainly will exacerbate an existing situation if not addressed correctly. I'd also say, there was a comment from staff that this was just a 45-foot gentle increase. I think that does have to be taken in the context of the topography of this property. This property is at a higher level than the existing townhomes, and so there are significant concerns regarding screening and privacy. We do recognize that, let's be honest, this property will be developed at some point by someone. And we also recognize that infill development is important. But one of the hallmarks of that type of development, and this is from the city's policy, is mitigating adverse impacts on adjacent homes. And so that's really what we're asking you to consider with this last point. Again, our understanding is that these are 3-story townhomes at this higher elevation, and we would echo concerns about screening, both with a potential for an increased buffer on the southern side of this property that does back up to these existing homes, tree preservation, but also additional screening requirements. Those would all be significant to our community and to the privacy that our folks would be looking for. As proposed, we think that it's not compatible with surrounding areas, being our development. To the left is a recreation area, open space. I mean, it is a golf course, but it's not built upon. And so we would just ask that in its current form again, that this application not be recommended for approval.
Thank you. I believe the applicant had about 3 minutes left on her time. With those 3 minutes, would you like to address any of what we heard? Would you like to wait for us to ask you questions? Or?
Yes, ma'am. David Phillips, I'm the applicant.
Okay.
And the developer as well, and the general contractor, builder. I don't know if 3 minutes will be enough to elaborate on that, so I might have to ask for an extension or at least to have you guys address the litany of questions, because I in fact do have answers for each and every one of them. So I'll start on the back end, and then I'll let you guys lead me as you desire.
Okay, thank you.
We do indeed put forth this 8-unit townhome plan as a revised plan. The initial plan we had was a conceptual plan. It did look very much different than this. It didn't work. It didn't flow well. It didn't work properly with the discharge, ingress and egress onto Litford Road. It also did not have the best use for these new homes with their aesthetics. That's why we've placed a condition there for all members around, specifically the townhomes just to the south and the landings. We are just as mindful as they are about, just like we're looking at each other right now. You're going to be looking at me, and I'm going to be looking at you in these new homes. There is going to be some screening, and it will look very much like a side yard C in the city's UDO. Now, just to elaborate for what that means, that's a combination of basically 3 different types of vegetation. Some taller stuff, might be maples, might be Leland cypress, some variety like that. Then there's a middle story tree, some more bushy tree, but something that, as you mentioned, if you plant Leland cypress in a row, you have gaps in the middles, as well as they have to grow. You can't get a 40-foot Leland cypress anywhere. It's going to be about a 14 to 16-foot tree, and then some understory as well. We want it to look pretty from both sides. There was a mention of the existing Leland cypress. That was meant to be there for screening for the same reason. Between the golf course, the home, and the townhomes, they are indeed in bad shape. And we mentioned at length in the community meeting that we had, which was very well attended, had about 14 members of the community. They're looking pretty bad. We weren't exactly sure where they were. And there's a fine line now that we've looked and got the survey done. Some are, some aren't. We intend to work with the landings, the property owner adjacent to the south. If some are there and those trees are in bad shape, we intend to take down any screening trees that are dying or dead. And we intend to replace them with our buffer trees to enhance the existing buffer. So we're already going to meet that condition inside of our proposed development. 8 units is the right, with your permission, Madam.
Just 1 minute. We are running up on 12 o'clock. Are we going to lose quorum? How long can individuals remain? You have to leave at 12. So we're going to lose quorum at 12 o'clock. Hey, wait. Thank you. So we're not going to get through this at this meeting, and I would imagine we want to hear more from you. So can I just, without objection, defer this case to our February 11th meeting? Yes, Commissioner O'Haver.
Can we just try to give the applicant some direction? I don't want to just defer it and then
Sure.
come back. And
So, okay, what types of information or other conditions would you like to see him come back with?
I mean, I have some questions about sort of that 18-ish foot strip that's between that parcel. I'm curious what the side yard C distance is. And then I sort of heard 2 different things from the opposition. First, it was they wanted views, and then now they want screening. So I'm not if it's screening, I have sort of a different approach than views, but they don't seem that there's any views that exist. They're talking about taking down cypress because they're dead and adding more to provide more screening. So those are really my only questions.
Okay, are there other, yes, Commissioner Raines?
For the applicant, I guess what I've heard from those opposed and the applicant is, as Commissioner Haver mentioned, buffers. So would the applicant be willing to take a look at adding actually the type C buffer as a condition, as a question? The second question is, if your concept, I know the concept can change, shows 8, would the applicant be willing to limit the number of units to 8 for, as part of this recombination application?
Yes and yes. And we will not only add that we would put a C there, type, but if any of the cooperation with the landings, the neighbors to the south, were to have us leaving some of the trees that are in good shape, we'll look at a holistic view. We have some support here that feel that all of them are dead. We obviously have a different view from the opposition that you heard that, well, maybe not all of them are dead, and maybe not all of them are on the property. I intend to have a sit down. This is a brand new occurrence. We didn't know that we had a couple of lawyers on the opposite side. We didn't know nobody really voiced this opinion at the community meeting. And when we talked out our proposed ideas on this, it seemed to congeal. So I want to just say to the commission here that we're going to work with them no matter what. And I know one of your most strong items is stormwater. We've got that. We've got a big plan for that, and it's not going to affect the southern neighbors at all. It's going to go into an existing.
Right.
And we're going to have it metered rate, and it's going to be engineered design, and it's going to slow down the discharge rate from what it is if it were just running normally.
So I appreciate that, but strangely enough, I normally don't have comments because I understand that. That's why it just so happened it was odd on the previous case. That's why I made that comment.
Yes, okay.
Good, thank you. So with that.
Well, I would like to just, add one more comment. I do appreciate the condition about materials because we ask a lot of applicants to do that and they push back. And so I think I want to commend the applicant for doing that because it's something I ask for a lot. So that is one of my strong issues too. So thank you for going ahead and dealing.
And to that one that I also have heard you speak about before, height. If we were just to go like some of the other development has happened, the last unit to sell in the community is $5.2 million on 0.7 acres, one house, 3 stories. It reached up to the top of the UDO limit for its height. If we were to put that there, there's nothing we can do about the topo. The height of the ground is the height of the ground. We are going to grade it. We're going to make it pretty. We're going to make sure that we take into account the stormwater collection so we don't have a dam runover effect, nothing coming, because it does slope toward those townhomes. So we're going to utilize that catchment as not only a slow down dam like at the end of the ski slope, but it's also going to retain it and run it out into the existing.
I don't mean to cut you off. Sure. I just don't want to lose quorum because we'll have to stop the meeting. So and thank you for waiting patiently through this meeting, but we don't want to rush through your case. So
well, thank you for that
when would the conditions need to be presented for us to hear them at our February 11th meeting, Mr. York?
They would have to get draft conditions. They would have to get draft conditions in this Friday. Staff would comment, I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday, and then they would have to submit signed conditions.
By next Friday.
By next Friday.
Would that work for you?
And then they could be on the 11th.
Okay, so then we will defer this case until our February 11th meeting.
Thank you kindly, appreciate it.
Thank you. Very quickly, before we lose quorum, we need to approve the minutes from the January 14th, 2025 meeting. Does anyone have any changes? I noted a couple things under attendance for absence. It said Mr. McCrimmon, it should be Ms. McCrimmon. And I noticed that for the old business item Z1224 Old Cruise Road, there was not an explanation for Mr. Peeler's opposing vote. Council always asks for that, so if you could include that, that was what I had.
From last
Yes, from the last meeting. So with those changes, did anybody else have anything else? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the January 14th, 2025 meeting with those changes.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, great. Report of the chair. The chair isn't here, but she wanted me to express her regrets and to tell Mr. York she's enjoyed working with you. Sorry she missed your last commission meeting. Moving on to me, the vice chair, we will have a special committee of the whole meeting this Thursday, January 30th at 4 p.m. When we checked last week, we had quorum. Can we please confirm who will be here for January 30th, 4 p.m. in this room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Ms. Miller will be here.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Yes, we're good. Same, Mr. York, enjoy working with you, but we'll see you at Committee of the Whole. Let's go down the line really quickly.
We do not have any infrastructure and mobility topics for this month. That's all I got, thanks. Oh, and Mr. York, has been great working with you, and enjoy your next chapter.
No report, and unless it's changed since I looked last, we don't have any topics for the text change committee. Did we do?
You will have a meeting, and there
Okay.
will be a topic. I cannot remember off the top of my head right now which one it is.
Well, I apologize for that.
February
The,
19th.
It says items to be determined, and the staff is still working on that. Yeah.
So text change meeting will
I'm
be.
hearing a lot of suggestions from my colleagues, but I'm pretty sure none of them are the right one. But it will be, you will have an item for discussion.
Okay,
On February 19th at 4 p.m.
thank you. Commissioner Littman?
I have spoken with Chair Miller and also Bynum Walter. I received an offer that requires out-of-state relocation. So my last day would be the week that ends on the 28th, so of February. So that will be my last. But Mr. York, it has been an absolute pleasure serving alongside you as well. So thank you for everything. And I'll be submitting my written resignation to you, Shanitha. But thank you all. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I know I'll see you again.
Commissioner Peeler?
It's been great working with you, Mr. York. I've learned a lot from you, so sad to see you go, but I'm excited to work with you. Should I give my thing on Old Cruise now, or should I put that in writing?
Should you give your what?
You were saying the comments on Old Cruise Road on the previous case. Should I do that in writing?
You can email it to
Okay.
Shanitha. Is that
I'll leave it.
right? Is that okay, Bynum? That he emails it?
Well, it needs to be what he said in the meeting.
Do you need to look back at the recording to make sure you say what you said?
Right, if you,
How
go
about-
back and look, go back and look at the videotape. If you explained your no vote, then yeah, let's put it in the minutes.
Yeah.
If you didn't, we don't need to create it.
Right.
That would just
Cool.
be something the chair would like to have when
I'll go look and I'll
Bynum and the chair
communicate that
present
to
the
planning.
recommendation.
Other than that, no report.
Commissioner Fox?
Strategic Planning has a meeting scheduled for February 12th at 4 p.m. In this building.
And Commissioner O'Haber?
No report. Mr. York, I just want to comment that I'm super excited. After 5 years, you remember to pull that mic in front of you when you commented at the end of the meeting.
That's right.
Other than that, I don't have anything to add.
He's using humor to cover his emotions.
That's right, that's right. Well, Commissioner Littman, you threw me there. I just would like to say that it has been a pleasure working with you. I really have learned a lot about affordable housing, and best wishes to you. I'll miss you.
I'll be around, so I'll be around for February, so that's good.
Well, still, I just wanna say it. Best wishes.
I do think maybe you bring a wealth of knowledge on the affordable housing, and it's such an important topic. So I don't know how we get to council that. I would love to. We all would probably like to replace you with someone with similar knowledge, because you understand it. It's such an issue, and there's lots of fors and against, and you just bring a really good perspective. So I think we need to
Yes,
replace
agree.
somebody with you.
I think you just put it on the record, so we'll make sure it's included in the minutes. Thank you. Anything else? All righty, well, all hearts and minds are in agreement. Meeting adjourned.